Why do leaders understand transformation but still operate in command mode? Let's sit with that for a second, because most leaders today know the language of transformation. They agree with it, and yet, under pressure, something else happens. You attend a leadership program. You learn about empowerment. You discuss psychological safety. You explore transformational leadership models. You agree with everything. It makes sense. You live inspired. And for a moment, it feels like something shifted. Then, 2 weeks later, a deadline slips. A conflict escalates. Pressure increases. And you step in. You decide. You control. You tighten. Command mode is back. Most leadership programs challenge your thinking. Very few challenge where you stand inside the system. And that difference explains almost everything. Let's separate two types of challenge: cognitive challenge and positioning challenge. Now, cognitive challenge improves how you think about leadership. You learn new models, you understand complexity better. You recognize bias, you expand vocabulary. That's valuable. It increases competence. But positioning challenge is different. It is not about better thinking. It is about different behavior under pressure. It questions where you stand inside the system. It asks, are you the decision owner or the decision architect? Are you the smartest voice or the clarity amplifier? Are you protecting control or building capacity? That's not about knowledge. That's about identity. And most leadership development stays cognitive. It explains the difference between command leadership and transformational leadership. Command leadership is control-driven, clear hierarchy, direct instruction, tight supervision. It works in stable environments, in low ambiguity, in short-term horizons. In those conditions, command can be efficient. But under complexity, command scales poorly, because the leader becomes the bottleneck. Now, transformational leadership, in theory, mobilizes people, aligns around purpose, builds autonomy, encourages initiative. Most leaders understand this intellectually. They agree with it. They can even teach it. But understanding transformation is not the same as repositioning yourself. And here's the uncomfortable part. Command leadership feels safe. When pressure increases, the instinct is reduce variability, increase control, centralize decisions, shorten the loop, and yes, that works, at least temporarily. It works because it removes uncertainty, it speeds up decisions, it reduces exposure in the moment. But over time, it weakens the system, because capacity concentrates at the top. And when capacity concentrates, the organization becomes fragile. Positioning challenge forces a harder question. Can you tolerate decisions you would not personally make, even when the stakes are visible? Can you allow intelligent mistakes when a client is watching? When timelines are tight? When reputation is at stake? Can you hold standards without micromanaging execution? That's not cognitive. That is emotional and structural. It is about how much responsibility you are willing to distribute. Leadership capacity collapses to its weakest condition under pressure. If your clarity is strong, but your tolerance for tension is weak, you will default to command. If your competence is high, but your trust in others is low, you will default to control. So the issue is not whether you know transformational leadership theory. The issue is whether your positioning supports it. Let me make this precise. Cognitive challenge says delegation increases ownership. Positioning challenge goes further. It asks, why do you step in when ownership becomes uncomfortable. Cognitive challenge says, empowered teams perform better. Positioning challenge asks, what happens inside you when performance temporarily drops? Cognitive challenge teaches the model. Positioning challenge exposes the reflex. And reflex always wins under pressure because reflex is faster than thinking. That's why so many leaders say they believe in empowerment, but operate in command when stakes rise. Their thinking evolved, their positioning did not. And this is where leadership programs often stop too early. They create insight, but they do not destabilize posture. Real development requires controlled destabilization, not theoretical discomfort, real exposure to your own patterns. You must experience what happens when you do not intervene. You must observe your impulse to rescue. You must confront your discomfort with distributed authority. That's identity work. And identity work cannot be done safely if the system around you reinforces old behavior. If your board expects instant certainty, if your culture punishes mistakes under consequence, if incentives reward heroic intervention, then command will always return. So the real distinction is not command versus transformational as leadership styles. It is centralization versus capacity building as positioning. Command asks, how do I ensure this gets done now? Transformation asks, how do we enable this to hold without me, especially under pressure? That second question is destabilizing because it reduces your visible control. It increases shared responsibility and it requires patience. But it builds resilience. And under complexity, resilience beats control. Let me say this clearly. You do not move from command to transformation because you attended a program. You move when your identity shifts from I am responsible for the answer to I am responsible for the conditions. That shift is subtle, but once it happens, it changes everything. Meetings change, decision processes change, escalation patterns change, talent development changes. Because now you are designing a system, not proving your competence. So, if you want to test whether your leadership positioning changed, ask yourself, when pressure increases, do I tighten or do I clarify? Do I centralize or do I strengthen alignment? Do I control or do I reinforce standards and let people act? Transformation is not softer. It is structurally stronger because it builds distributed capacity. Command may feel decisive, but under sustained complexity, it becomes brittle. And brittle systems break. So, if your leadership development only challenged how you think, but never challenged where you stand, then you improved vocabulary, not capacity. And leadership does not rise to vocabulary. It collapses to positioning under pressure. If this way of thinking is useful, the deeper analysis lives in the newsletter. That's where I examine leadership capacity at structural level. If you want the next breakdown, subscribe to the channel. And if this changes how you see motivation and leadership, share it with someone who leads. Rewire how you lead.